Prologue. Welcome. You are about to embark on a journey through the turbulent seas of my life. Like Homer's ancient classic tale, my story is a real contemporary Greek tragedy about a man tested by a higher power as he is put in situation after situation for many years, including a trip to the underworld, fighting various forces that prevent him from returning home to be reunited with his beloved family. My odyssey, like that of Odysseus, involved trials and tribulations that have directly affected 3 generations of my family. Of course, my story also resembles that of Job, from religious scriptures, an honorable family man who at first is blessed with employment and children, but is eventually tormented when horrific disasters take away his children, property, and health. Like Job, I struggled to understand the reasoning behind my losses as I wallowed in misery for 7 years, looking for a way to end it, fighting to restore my life to the way it was before. Suffering. My story is not unlike that of Jesus Christ, who was arrested and taken to court to be judged and tried for a crime that he is not guilty of, yet was brought before civilians who in turn condemned him and demanded that he be sentenced to death through crucifixion. After his death, Jesus' soul descends into the realm of the dead, but ultimately returns to the land of the living, although not before all who loved, followed, and stood by him. Helplessly watched and agonized with him while he was being crucified. My family lived the last decade of their life deeply wounded and affected by the injustices that befell us. This is one of the reasons why this book had to be written. Revelation. I had written this book in a rather unconventional manner. During the conceptual beginnings and early draft writings of this book, I had gone from using English to French to Greek and back again to capture with precision the thoughts, ideas, points, meanings, and even words that I wanted to use and put onto the computer screen. I found that the reader would lose out if I relied exclusively on the English language, as it would gloss over the details and specifics that I wanted to convey. Both the French and Greek languages are richer and more expressive than the English one. At times, I had to conceptualize and write my message in either French or Greek before settling on the final English version. This approach, while daunting, was worthwhile in the end, as it made it easier to write the final French and Greek versions. Once the French version was completed, it was easy to proceed with my preliminary translation into Spanish, given its connection to French. Latin. When the Spanish version was finalized, it was in turn used as the basis for the rough draft translations into Italian and Portuguese. I intend to have this book translated into an additional 30 languages as well. I started with Chinese, then proceeded with Russian, Vietnamese, German, Arabic, Hebrew, Punjabi, and so on and so forth. I want this book to be available to as many listeners as possible, especially my son and daughter, so that they will know the truth about who they are, where their ancestors came from, what really happened to their mother and father, and why our family was obliterated. Everything was done to keep them from being reunited with their family. They were purposely isolated from their culture, religion, ethnic community, and even friends in their hometown of Ottawa. The more languages that this book is written in, the more likelihood that the children will be able to listen in the language of their choice, the whole truth about what truly happened to us rather than what everyone else wants them to believe. The purposes of this book are multifaceted. It is to reveal the truth about the tragic injustices that has befallen my family in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, from April 2008 to June 2015. It is to shame the people in Ottawa that have mistreated and continue to mistreat those who are different from the overwhelmingly conventional Anglo-Saxon majority and large Francophone minority. It is to hopefully inspire, or at least compel, those in Ottawa and in the neighboring regions to let go of their hatred and anger so that they may warm up their hearts. Despite the frosty, chilling winter temperatures typically encountered during the months of November through March, it is to inform and educate people on how the prosecutors and the police manipulate the judicial system to obtain their much-coveted conviction with the help of like-minded judges and, when children are involved, social workers. And it is to remind those with direct authority and those who have access to it that they have a moral responsibility and legal obligation to assist those who come to them for help regardless of their gender, socioeconomic, political, religious, or ethnic backgrounds, especially when they are vulnerable individuals involved, such as children, the elderly, and the handicapped. The Angelus tragedy should never have happened. One should never turn their backs on those in need of help, as that is irresponsible, immoral, and inhumane. This book hopefully provides us with an opportunity to learn from past mistakes and to ensure that such mistakes are never repeated. I do not expect the listener to suddenly change their behavior based on this book alone, but if I can make the listener stop and think before they act next time, then the primary objective of this book will have been fulfilled. Although my story mostly takes place in Ottawa, the numerous messages inscribed throughout this book are not limited to those who live and/or work there. The concepts of respect, fairness, courtesy, consideration, empathy, thoughtfulness, benevolence, responsibility, and duty should be espoused by everyone, regardless of where they live or work. We are all human beings, worthy of being treated equally and equitably in all aspects of our lives. Unnegotiable. Some passages of this book will be comical and filled with sarcasm and tongue-in-cheek humor. Others will be political, philosophical, and even spiritual. Moreover, listeners may find some words crude, insulting, and even provocative. Although I was educated and employed in Ottawa, I was never a fan of the superficiality, deceitfulness, and deceptiveness of the political correctness that infects Canada's capital. Viral. Beneath the courteous exterior of its residents lies an ugliness and passive-aggressive hostility in Ottawa that needs to be exposed. The impersonal, hollow, prim and proper conduct, along with the insincerity that runs amok in Ottawa, conflict with my Mediterranean heritage and my American metropolitan upbringing. As the listener will soon discover, if they are not already aware, prison is different from the outside world. The language and behaviors exhibited in prison are at complete odds with conventional society. Prisons are brutally honest places. There is simply no time for politeness, propriety, and elegance. A part of me found this contrast between Ottawa and prison to be quite shocking, while another part of me found it to be refreshing. Prison inmates are direct, candid, and yes, even more honest than the people who live or work in Ottawa. Alarming. Prison inmates generally say what they mean and mean what they say. One is hard-pressed to find someone in Ottawa who does the same. I originally wanted to title this book Capital Authority, as suggested by my Somalian friend Fuji, short for refugee, to reflect the autocratic mindset of the politicians, police, prosecutors, judges, juries, and social workers in Ottawa. I ultimately settled with The Ottawa Way, Guilty by Gender in Canada's Capital, as this title better explains and addresses a significant contributor of the underlying issues that directly plague the city, but also the people, places, and policies that are indirectly affected by Ottawa, even though they are located beyond the city's borders. Pandemic. Ottawa is what it is today because of its history, geography, and political role both within Canada, geographically the largest nation in the world at 455,800 square kilometers or 176,000 square miles, and internationally. Chapter 1 attempts to explain the factors that have shaped Ottawa's current existence. I am by no means a historian, nor do I claim to be an expert in Canada's history. Still, I do have a basic threefold understanding of Canada's history, partly because of my studies in high school, which provided me with a French Quebec perspective, partly because of my undergraduate university studies, which gave me an Aboriginal one, and partly because I am an ethnic minority living in a predominantly Caucasian English-French country. I have refreshed my memory of Canadian history by reviewing various sources and have combined everything that I have learned from my undergraduate studies in the physical sciences, psychology, and sociology, merging them with everything that I have learned from my 2 graduate degrees in administration, my 7-year experience as a federal public servant, as well as my personal experiences as a 20-year resident of Ottawa, have been used throughout the book to provide my interpretation and understanding of the city. I reiterate that the historical events in Chapter 1 are far from being comprehensive. The chapter will not delve into the pre-colonization of Canada when various tribal Aboriginal nations lived here thousands of years before the Europeans arrived. It will not go into the first expeditions to Canada by the Scandinavians in the years 985 and 986. It will skip over the early territorial claims made by the Portuguese in 1497 and 1498, as well as those made by the French from 1524 to 1609. Chapter 1 begins in the year 1610, when the Ottawa area was first discovered by the French, and ends with 2015. For those of you who are seeking a thorough breakdown of Canada's history, I encourage you to either take classes in an academic setting and/or conduct your own self-studies. Vast, endless sources exist in libraries, bookstores, and on the Internet. For those of you who do not have a keen interest in history or simply loathe it altogether, I give you permission to skip Chapter 1. In Chapter 2, the book becomes more personal, as it reveals when and why my parents came to Canada and our attempts to assimilate, albeit unsuccessfully, through no fault of our own, into this new society. A review of Greek history, my family's cultural heritage, is presented to provide some context. Chapter 3 similarly discloses the origins of my children's mother and how her upbringing and experiences before we married have ultimately impacted our lives as husband and wife with 2 children. Chapters 4 and 5 focus on the consecutive tragedies and injustices that have plagued me, my parents, my children, and loved ones over the course of 7 years, even beyond. Chapter 6 provides some degree of justice with a shimmer of hope in the aftermath of those 7 horrible years, but not without huge losses that still affect me and my family. Finally, the epilogue not only closes my story, but also leaves the reader with a profound yet straightforward message that some may find offensive, while others may agree with empathy and/or applaud with enthusiasm. Whatever the case may be, I thank you in advance for listening to this book. May God continue to bless you and your loved ones. Take care.